Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Danae Thomas. I'm a co-founder of Cocoa Diaries, which serves, as you know, as a Black resource hub for Black women in college. And we are launching our Diary of a Black Woman in STEM series, which is the purpose to provide a network for Black women in STEM and just provide them with any tools necessary to see them succeed. So this second episode is titled The Good Doctors, where we'll be having an inclusive conversation about ways to pursue doctoral degrees in STEM, whether that be getting a PhD or MD. In this event, I have partnered with Ms. Noelle Jacquette, who is also a panelist this evening. So you guys will get to know her a little bit better, and we will go ahead and get started. I'm gonna keep adding more people. So like I said before, the diary, you all see my screen, okay. Like I said before, the Diary of a Black Woman in STEM is to provide a network of Black women in STEM, whether it be any field in science, any technology field, engineering, mathematics, you name it, because STEM is such a traditionally white male dominated field. It's so important to see more women like us navigating those fields, pioneering it and trailblazing it to where we can feel comfortable and see ourselves create these innovative things in our various capacities. And the second objective of this series would just be to distribute these resources for you all, whether that be via our Instagram, our website, but just to have these conversations to provide insight and experience and just give us something to lean on when we're looking for which direction or the best way to go. So the overview of this event, we'll have a brief presentation regarding the differences between a Doctor of Medicine degree and a Doctor of Philosophy degree, the different types of programs you can do with either of those degrees, typically how long those degrees last, and just general financial aid and assistance tools. And then followed up by the presentation, we will have our panel, which is who you're really here to see, the three lovely ladies that are here to just speak on their experiences as a Black woman in STEM pursuing a doctoral degree. All right, so first things first, Doctor of Medicine. When you think of doctor, and if someone comes into the room saying, hey, I'm a doctor, but I'm not an acting physician, practical clinical doctor, because there's two different degrees. The Doctor of Medicine is a degree earned once you complete medical school. Typically, those programs are 4 to 5 years long, depending upon the program. And you're basically working to become a licensed professional to practice medicine, whether that be in an urgent care clinic, a hospital setting, a private practice, you name it. And you have the ability to treat patients. And outside of just treating patients and seeing patients on the front end, there are a lot of research opportunities that medical doctors get to be a part of, whether that be through clinical trials or just other research opportunities to further serve the field that they're currently working in. And for the Doctor of Philosophy, it's known as the highest degree in academia. It's based around creating and defending a research dissertation. So you have a research thesis that you create in the beginning of your program, depending on the field you're in, and you're essentially working your way to become an expert in that particular field, in that particular study or interest that you have selected upon your program selection. Through your PhD, there's a lot of professorship opportunities. You can even, outside of working in the university academia system, you can work in public school systems and be professors and teachers in that realm as well. There's a lot of research opportunities through the Doctor of Philosophy degree program as well. And also specifically for psychology majors or psychology interested people, you can do research doctorate, where the psychology is more research based on psychology in the various modes and disciplinaries or disciplines in psychology. And then you have your practice doctorate where you can actually do more clinical practice work rather than just the research-based work. So that's something to know about the PhD programs, specifically for psychology. And like mentioned before, Doctor of Medicine programs are typically a lot less time in terms of program length compared to PhD programs. They're typically 4 to 5 years, like I said, depending on the program or school you're interested or attending. And for a Doctor of Philosophy, they say the average is 5 to 6 years, but it can take as long as it takes for you to get your doctor of philosophy. It can take 8 years, 10 years. It just depends on the length and the complexity of your research, or maybe or sometimes when people take that much time, they may have started their doctorate, then took some time off to start a family, to travel, and then they came back to it. So the opportunities are endless because you can always return to your work if you're truly passionate about becoming an expert in your field. And then when we talk about MD, PhD programs, which many people don't know exist, they have a combined program where you get your Doctor of Medicine and your Doctor of Philosophy in a specific STEM field. And those programs average around 8 years, but it just depends on the program. It's not a set in stone number. And briefly, just going over some funding and financial assistance opportunities for these programs. Many students pay for these programs via grants or scholarships. Many of them, unfortunately, have to take out student loans. And specifically, I know for some PhD programs, they require or allow students who are in those programs to teach for reimbursement. So whether that be teaching in psychology, genetics, microbiology, you name it, some schools offer that opportunity for you to teach and to get reimbursed to help pay for school through your teaching. Now, I know that was a bit brief, but I just really wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of the presentation, and that is our panel. So I just want to go ahead and introduce our 3 panelists. So we have Ms. Noel, we have Ms. Jandalyn, and we have Ms. Jasmine. So if each of you want to briefly introduce yourselves and just let us know what program you're in, what school you attend, and something you did today to feed into your self-care.
I guess I'll go first since I was up there first. My name's Noel Jacquet. I'm a second year at LSU Health Shreveport. I'm a PhD in the Department of Pharmacology, Toxicology, and Neuroscience. In my lab, we do cancer pharmacology to work on improving the lives of cancer patients. And I'm primarily interested in doing more of pharmacology and toxicology in my research. And one of the things I did today for self-care is that I got up and I made me some yogurt this morning, which is a lot because I normally skip breakfast. But I do like yogurt a lot. So I got up a little extra early before my busy day to have me a nice breakfast.
Okay, I can go next. Hi, my name is Jasmine Grant. I am a first year MD PhD student at the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston. My program is a joint program along with MD Anderson. I'm currently in my first year of medical school. I'm about to end. And for my PhD, I'm interested in pharmacology and experimental therapeutics, specifically addiction and chronic pain.
And something you did today.
Oh, and right, it's something I did today. I took a nap. I had a lot of meetings and lectures this morning. So right after lunchtime, I came home and took a nap. But yeah.
Okay. I'll go. I think I missed the mark on when I was supposed to go, so I'm so sorry about that, you guys. But my name is Jandalyn Washington. I am a first year medical student at Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia. And something that I did today for self-care, I had an exam this morning that was about 4 hours. So afterwards, I went out and got some food with my girlfriends. So that was nice.
Yes, I'm glad you all took time out of your day to do something self-care worthy, because a lot of times we get overwhelmed by what we have to do and we don't really take that time to just breathe and woosah. But thank you all for joining, and we will go ahead and get started into our questions. So my first question for y'all, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing this so that we can just focus on you all. So my first question I have, and anyone is open to answer, what is your end game when it comes to your career in STEM?
Okay, I can go. So for me, and I kind of mentioned this in my biography for the page, but essentially, since I'm taking a more traditional route in terms of pursuing a MD degree, I would like to go through medical school, become a practicing physician upon finishing residency, And long-term career-wise, I would really like to integrate medicine with other things such as philanthropy, and really doing something that's more holistic versus just being a full-time clinician or hospital practicing doctor. But obviously to get to that point, it does require some proper training. So I really would just like to be a health advocate for minorities, especially women of color, and be able to do some practicing as well.
Okay, I'll go. I actually want to be a forensic scientist, which is kind of seen as like a out there job. A lot of people who do PhDs go right back into academia, and they either teach on like an undergrad level or on a graduate level. But I want to go into less, not so much like an industry job, but some people may consider it. But yeah, I want to be a forensic scientist. I want to do either forensic tox or forensic chemistry. So I plan to spend the rest of my life doing bench work, hopefully.
And as for me, I want to be able to practice clinically, still figuring out what that is, but my two main interests are anesthesiology, specifically pain medicine, and then psychiatry, specifically addiction psychiatry. And be able to work my PhD in by taking the things that we see clinically and applying them in a lab setting. Overall, I just want to be a health advocate, be a voice and inspire women of color, especially. There's not too many Black women in the field, especially with MD PhDs. So my goal is to just be a mentor and guide other women of color through medicine and, increase the numbers, increase the representation that we see in the field.
Yes, I'm very, very thankful to have selected and asked you guys to come because I believe you all provide different perspectives when it comes to STEM. And I appreciate the want and need to just diversify the field of STEM because we all know it's white, male dominated, and a lot of Black women bring a lot of things to the table when it comes to STEM. And a lot of people overlook that just because of we're a woman first and then a Black woman at that. So my one thing is, was there anything challenging upon the start of your program that you had to overcome being a Black woman in the field or in the space that you were in?
Yeah, I can go first. So the first thing is that I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. And so I had to move to Houston, Texas. And that was a big adjustment for me. I also one of 3 Black people. Can you all hear me? I hope you can hear me. My internet's going out, but I'm one of 3 Black people in my actual program, which is something that was a learning curve for me. And it was something that I noticed immediately, but I was like, okay, I'm meant to be here clearly to, make that path and pave the way for people that look like me to be more comfortable, because I can see how that would be such a very uncomfortable experience. And just learning the lingo, learning to talk. Like I went to HBCU and I was very comfortable with my kin, so coming here, it was adjustment for sure. But I had mentors that helped me, and that's what I really would suggest, is you have a mentor who can help you and guide you through that navigation and that change, and also just being a new chapter, being a newly grad. So yeah, it was definitely an adjustment for me.
I would say that my experience was a little different than the one that Jasmine just explained, because similar to Jasmine, I also attended an HBCU for undergrad. So I graduated from Spelman College in May, but then I continued my graduate level education at an HBCU as well. So I'm currently, like I said, at Morehouse School of Medicine, and my class demographic is predominantly African American. When I was applying to medical schools, I did look at some other schools and get accepted to schools that were deemed as PWIs. But I think that during my time at Spelman especially, it really reminded me of the importance of being trained and taught, important to by people who not only look like you, but also really do care to see you succeed. And so for me, my biggest adjustments would have been more academic, if anything, rather than social. But I'm extremely grateful for the community that I've developed at Morehouse School of Medicine, and being able to see Black MDs and PhDs and MPHs and people that are in these fields on a daily basis.
For me, I actually went to PWI for undergrad, but it was almost pretty mixed. Most of our leadership organizations on campus were ran by Black students, so I was always comfortable being myself. And so the institution that I came for my PhD was a big adjustment because I'd worked there throughout undergrad and summers, and I thought I was accepted by everyone and that everything was normal. And then I started as a student, and things were very different. I wasn't allowed to just be myself as I normally was. It seemed like they kind of wanted me to fit in with what they thought their status quo was. So I actually had a big issue with some people in the school complaining about my attire and my fingernails. A lot of people complain. But there weren't any rules against it. So my PI and I worked it out, thankfully. He's a really good guy. And like, I love him to death. He was really supportive for that. But yeah, it was just another one of the things where they just kind of wanted me to assimilate to fit their idea of what they thought a graduate student was. And I've never really fit that mold. I've always been like super girly, like want to wear nails, want to wear pink. I've always been that kind of person, but also love science. And so I guess they just didn't expect someone like me. So I came and I shook things up and I just told them that they'll have to deal with it. And I'm still here. That's so far been my challenge, but we've calmed down a little bit. I told them if they want to show me a rule about my nails, I'll take them off, but they haven't shown me one yet. So I'm still here.
That's right. So moving forward, she said, absolutely true. Yes, I definitely agree because growing up, most of my doctors were my pediatrician, my dentist, they were all Black. Maybe it's because I grew up in College Park. So that was pretty much most of the access that we had there. But it's very important that we see ourselves doing the things that we want to see done for us. So my next question is, how has being a PhD or MD student or both, how has your experience in your program so far shaped your perspective of the field you want to pursue as your career?
I don't want y'all to get tired of me talking, but I'll go. For me, I've always been like a break the mold kind of person. And I think actually starting my program, I realized that people in academia are just so fine going with the status quo. My school's having a big issue right now of like trying to revamp both our medical school and our graduate school. And part of the issues that keep coming up are, why would we change it when we've been doing this for 20 years, 30 years? And I've never been that person. And I think that was a big shock for me. My undergrad wasn't like that either. Like if no one thought something was working, they'd be like, okay, let's fix it. And here they're very much into tradition and just keeping things the same way for the sake of it. So that's been a big challenge for me. And like being the one to push those buttons, like I don't want to get up in a room full of mainly white people and be the one little Black girl that's speaking out about things need to change. But I told myself I just had to put my big girl pants on. If I gotta be the one to complain, I'm gonna have to be the one to do it.
Yeah, I definitely second Noel on knowing that like, since I'm here now, I was clearly put here for a reason. And if that is to change some stuff and shake some stuff up, then I'm going to go ahead and do that. For me, the biggest thing when I entered in, specifically with the PhD side, is that there could be people doing a lot of research on groups and groups of people and subcommunities that they have no clue what the day-to-day life of that person is. Specifically for addiction, I know a lot of researchers and PhDs who our whole goal is to understand molecular mechanisms of addiction and different disorders, but cannot tell me one experience they've ever had on the street with someone, a positive experience with someone who is dealing with that addiction. And for me, understanding that I have that real world, like well-rounded experience, I'm like, oh my God, I would love to continue on with this and know that I have both aspects so I could approach my research and my science differently and also approach those patients differently in care. And also the second thing is that with the medicine side, and I'm pretty sure Janelyn could also speak to this, a lot of the classic study tools and mechanisms and questions that we get are very stereotypical. So when you see a Black woman, you think of lupus. If you see a Black man, you think substance abuse, things like that. So trying to rework that and give different perspectives, specifically to my medical school, on ways that we can change that, or at least diversify how we speak of communities of color, is another big thing that I saw. And I was like, oh, I have experience on this, and I would love to like continue diversifying this further, and just sparking those conversations. If you don't have someone there that's, you know, been doing it and now you're here, it's like, I'm gonna do it. So yeah.
And Danae, do you mind repeating the question again, just to make sure I am answering it correctly?
Yeah, no problem. So I was just saying, like, how has your experience so far in your program kind of changed your perspective on the field that you intend to go to?
Okay, absolutely. So I will say for medical school, I remember people saying like the hardest part is getting in. And I think that now, being on the flip side, that couldn't be anything further from the truth. Because of the way that medicine is set up and has been set up for decades, they have it set up to where it is more difficult statistically for certain demographics to succeed. So we all know that standardized testing is a big issue in terms of not only just demographic adversity, but also socioeconomic differences in terms of people that are able to afford tutoring and extra help. And so a big part of your preclinical years, or your first 2 years in these programs, is going to consist of standardized testing. And then beyond that point, there's applications for residencies. If you would like to do a competitive specialty, they really want you to do research. For some people, that entails taking an entire year off to do research. Well, for some people, that's not financially attainable, because how are you going to fund your lifestyle? A lot of these programs may not be giving you stipends. So I think that now, being in medical school, I see that there is definitely a need for change, which is no surprise, no secret, but also that a lot of these things that are put in place for minorities to really not have the same opportunities or succeed, as well as other demographics, it is happening still on a larger scale, and it still just makes it that much harder. And so that really just comes down to having to be tenacious, having to have grit. A lot of it really has to do with the individual person rather than the program.
Yeah. Thank you all for that. And speaking on to what you said, Jandalyn, about the financial disadvantages that a lot of minority groups have trying to level the playing field in these instances. For you all specifically, if you don't mind sharing, what were some ways that you were able to find those financial opportunities to help you pay for school? Because school is not cheap, especially with this economy. The prices and inflation is just crazy. So how have you guys worked to make it financially feasible for you all to attend your specific programs?
I can go first. That was a big part onto why I chose the MD PhD program. And just to give some clarity, like some information, most MD PhD programs are NIH funded, which means that I'm funded throughout my entire tenure through the program. And I'm also given a salary. So I don't have any loans taken out, and I'm like super blessed and thankful and all of that, because that is a huge part of the blockage for people to enter into medicine and the field. So I'm also like someone that's trying to push MD PhD programs, because they like to hide that part, and make sure that we also know, people of color know about that specific advantage into a program. It's like, yeah, you do spend more time in it, but you're not also racked up in debt. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm not as fortunate as Jasmine. Regular MD programs are not usually offering scholarships unless the school is giving them out. And unfortunately, with HBCUs, the same as it is for undergrad, they are less prone to give out scholarships. So for me, a lot of the scholarship searching and obtaining has been personal. And stuff that I do on my own free time. So I will say the school will send out emails for opportunities. Family members will send emails for opportunities. And really, it's like every dollar counts. So I really just try to be very assertive in terms of looking for funding.
So as Jasmine kind of mentioned, as a PhD student, my degree is fully funded. So not only do I get a full scholarship for all of my tuition to cover the degree, I also get a stipend. To be completely transparent, I'm saying this because I know that my school stipend is pretty competitive, but I get $28,000 a year as my stipend, which is really good. The average is somewhere between 15 and 30,000 in the US. And if you're trying to obtain a PhD that isn't fully funded, you should look for another school. That is what one of my undergraduate professors told me. He's like, don't you dare apply for any program that's not fully funded, because it's pretty common in the US that most all PhDs will give you a stipend as well as a full scholarship. And so I know there's a big difference, and we kind of touched on some of the funding opportunities in the presentation. So for some degrees, they do more teaching where you have to teach to receive your stipend. My school isn't like that. So I go to class. I'm actually pretty much done with classes except for my electives at the moment. And then I would go to lab, do my lab work. And so what they're paying me for is to do that research. And you can get direct funding from your department, or a lot of people will get funding from different grants that they apply to also. So you can get a grant through your lab or funding through your department also.
And I wanted to add one more thing with the PhD side. The NIH specifically has diversity grants. They're called F31s, I believe. And those can also, like your PI can apply for those like for you. And then whatever like the money you're getting from that can also be applied to your salary, which is what I plan to do once I get to my PhD side.
Nice. Well, it's crazy how there's a physician shortage, but they don't want to provide incentives for physicians or physician students to go to school. But but that's another story for another day. But I'm glad I didn't know that most PhD programs were fully funded. That's awesome. And I guess that's a big selling point for them as well, because a lot of people get turned off because they have to pay so much, or they have to take out loans, or they have to find grants or find scholarships to be able to support themselves while going to school at the same time. So piggybacking off of just your application process, if you guys could like briefly describe what all that entails, because some people who may be watching this later on may not know the differences between applying to a medical school or applying to a school for their PhD. So if any one of you could elaborate on those application processes.
I'd actually like to go last if that's okay, because I had a unique experience with my application. So I'd probably let Jasmine start.
Yeah, I could start because I have like experience with both. So in the PhD application process is very difficult. It was actually probably one of the most difficult moments of my life, but it's a lot. And it's something that you really should prepare for at least a year in advance. Not only just because of the things you have to write on, your experiences and things like that, but also I had to take the MCAT, which was a big part of your application and making sure you score well. MD PhDs are very, very competitive. So that was a big part. And then from there, having to collect people to do recommendations for you was another big thing. With MD PhDs, you have to have one, at least from the person that you've had like the most research experience with. And that was for me at Howard University College of Medicine, I had a PI for about 2 years. So I had that relationship already, but I had to be in her lab, making sure that I was doing the things necessary so she could write like a really, really good letter for me. And then there's an application service, it's called EMCAS, and that's usually what medical schools use. And that is how I applied. With MD PhDs, you typically do more essays than the average medical student. So I had to do 3. My first one was just like a why medical school, like personal statement. The second one was like a why MD PhD. And then my third one was an actual research statement. So essentially almost like a mini thesis almost, if you will, on what research I've been doing and like how that applies to what I want to do clinically. So that was hard, just making sure that it was written well, having people look at it. I had a lot of people look at my application to the point where I was like second guessing myself almost, and I kind of applied a little bit late. to the application cycle. So I applied in September, and most MD PhDs, especially if you're applying that route, they apply super early. So like they immediately send in their application and get secondaries done in June. And so they move quicker. So I was a little behind, and I just tried to catch up as much as I could. So that's just the primary application. Then you have a secondary application where schools will reach back out to you, and then you have to provide more context. And again, with MD PhD, there's more like writing, more interviews, everything. So had to write a little bit more. And then once you get to the interview side, that's a little bit calmer. For me, I like interviewing. So once I was getting interviews, I was like, oh, this is great. But again, with MD PhD, I had to see both medical professionals and PhD professionals. So my interview days were pretty long. One school had me do 10 interviews just for like that one school. Yeah, it was insane. But the coming out on like the other side, I see why they do that, but at the same time, I also see why there's less people of color that apply, because you do need people around you to help you. You do need mentors. You need money. A lot of that stuff I had to come out of my own pocket. 10, yeah. A lot of that money had to come out of my own pocket. I was like saving up a little bit, but I did not expect how much I ended up spending at the end. So it was a lot. It was a lot, but I say all that to say is that we're here, we're talking, and I'm definitely someone who loves to mentor and loves to provide that opportunity to be a resource to someone, so I can make their load a little bit lighter. So yeah.
For me, I had a much lighter process. I'm so sorry, Jasmine. So I applied in the spring of my senior year, finishing undergrad, which sometimes I do get sad about. But I decided I wanted to go right into my PhD because I felt like if I was going to take a break, I was going to work. And I felt like if I worked, I was going to like my job too much to go back to school. So I applied at the end of January through GradCast, kind of like Jasmine mentioned. It's just for graduate schools. My school is also unique. We adopted what more schools are doing right now, and we've actually opted not for you to require to take the GRE, which is what most people take to get into graduate school, as opposed to the MCAT for medical school. So I did not take the GRE either. I'm not gonna say I'm a big gambler, but I knew that my chances of getting to this school were pretty high. So I worked at this school during undergrad, and everyone pretty much told me, like, you've been here so long, you're almost a shoo-in, like, we know what you're capable of. So I applied. Applications were due the end of January. By February, I heard back that they wanted to request me for an interview. So you go through that second round process. I only had to do one essay, like personal statement. I had to get 4 letters of recommendation, 3 or 4. And yeah, so that's a bit of a process, and they kind of want them from different types of people. So the person I had the most research experience with, I opted not to ask because he worked in the department that I was applying for. So I thought, what a flex if I don't ask him. And if I ask all, because I didn't want it to be biased and for him to be vouching for me. Like, I didn't want it to seem like he's begging for me to be a part of the department. So I asked mainly people from my undergraduate institution. And then when I did my second round of interviews, I did 3 different sessions with all of the professors. Our department's pretty small. We have like less than 15 professors. So I did 3 rounds of interviews with them, and the questions ranged. Like the easiest one I got, one of the professors asked me, what do I do to de-stress, like to relax? He was like, grad school is really stressful. What is your outlet? And I was like, well, I play video games all the time. And they thought that was funny. And I was like, Zelda, Mario, I'm on that. That's my free time. And then the hardest question was actually from my boss at the time. He was like, I see you got a C in organic chemistry and you took it 3 times and you got a B the last time. He's like, what happened with that? And so I wasn't too mad about that question. It's like I said, I'd known him for 4 years. It felt okay that he asked me that, but it wasn't too out of pocket. But that's not to say that someone else might not ask. So it is something to be prepared about. Sometimes they do ask you about your grades, and you just got to have a good story. And yeah, that was pretty much my process after I did my interviews. I heard back in like 2 or 3 weeks. Like the head of the department called me at like 8 a.m. and he's like, hey, I want to tell you before you get your letter, you're in. And then that was it.
That's awesome. Okay, so kind of like I mentioned when I started, my process was slightly different than the traditional process for attending medical school. So I attended a school that offered something called pipeline programs, which is something that I wasn't aware of prior to attending Spelman or even picking Spelman. I didn't even come into Spelman declaring pre-med. But upon deciding, they basically introduced me to pipeline programs, which is where the school will have a partnership with different schools around the country for different programs. For whatever reason, some schools, they would like to recruit more minority students from top HBCUs. Some schools would like to recruit more women. So whatever the reason is, they'll partner with the school. So in this case, Spelman, and they'll offer a separate application process specifically for students at that school. So for Spelman, I did a application process specifically for Morehouse School of Medicine. So I didn't go through the traditional AMCAS portal, but I did have to still do a lot of the components that a traditional applicant would. And so they still had a weed out process for us as they would for any other application. Just to qualify for the pipeline program, because you are applying separately, sometimes they'll look at older or dated scores, which I don't fully agree with, but I know some programs that I looked at, they would ask for your SAT scores, and you would have to have a minimum of 1,300 on your SAT out of, I think it was like 1,600 or 1,800 to qualify. And for some schools, they would require you to have taken X pre-medical classes already. And so I know there was one that I wanted to do originally that I wasn't eligible for because they wanted me to have already taken like fully finished chemistry and biology as a sophomore, which basically means you kind of hit the gate running, knowing that you want to do medicine. So I did Morehouse School of Medicines, which entailed a essay, and then you had to do an essay specifically as to why you want to attend that medical school on top of your overall personal statement. Still had to take the MCAT, and still had, I believe it was 2 rounds of interviews. And that was during COVID, so all of it was virtual. And then we heard back, I want to say about 2 months or so later, and then they'll usually give you about a week to 2 weeks to decide if you want to go there or not, because it's very competitive and you're essentially going to be taking somebody else's spot if you don't tell them. So did that process, and because it was specific for Spelman, the process took place a few months earlier than the traditional application process. So I actually knew that I was going to Morehouse School of Medicine for medical school before I finished my first semester of senior year.
Yeah, I didn't know about the pipeline program. That's pretty cool. And it kind of takes off the pressure of taking like the MCAT and all that stuff, depending on the school you're applying to. That's pretty awesome. I don't think a lot of people know about that.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And I definitely think that that's something that should be advertised more for high school students that know they want to do medicine, because it can open up doors that are traditionally made to be difficult for minority students. It can just make it, I don't want to say easier, but it does lighten the burden and lighten the financial aspect of having to pay for primaries and secondaries and different components of a traditional application.
I agree.
On that note, my mom went to Xavier, Louisiana for her PharmD. And I didn't know this until I went to college myself, but they have a specific program within their school for pharmacy majors, where you apply to their school of pharmacy. And so she never finished she never got an actual bachelor's. She did 2 years of like a bachelor's program where she took all of those same prereqs, Gen Chem and organic chemistry and PChem, all those things. And then she applied and went straight into their pharmacy school. So she only received the PharmD from them. But it was a shortened program for 6 years as opposed to a traditional 8 where you would get your bachelor's first and then your PharmD after.
And funny enough, you say that because I know Xavier is one of the schools that does offer pipeline programs as well for certain medical schools. So they're a great HBC to look at for people interested in going into medicine and healthcare careers.
Well, definitely be sure to make some posts about that too, because like I said, I didn't even know about all those opportunities, and that's something that they probably didn't tell us on purpose, but we're going to make sure that we spread the word because it's very important that we do that. So my very last question for you all is it's two-part question. What is your legacy that you want to leave once you get your degree and just in general outside of your career itself? And then lastly, what is any advice that you have for young students who are interested in STEM, but they don't know where to start or know where to, which direction to go?
I would say for me, I want my legacy to be one of that, like, she was a thought through trailblazer, being someone who was able to fight amongst the obstacles in her way, and just being the face for a degree program and just MD PhD in general that you don't necessarily see of, and being able to speak for, as well as being a woman of color, is the biggest thing that motivates me, and it honestly like keeps me going when I have days where I'm like, I don't, this is just you have those days where it's just a lot, and you just have to constantly remind yourself that this is what I'm doing it for. And my biggest piece of advice is to honestly be confident in yourself. Being confident and showing confidence is something that people can never take away from you. And it's something that I've been able to lead with and strive by, and it has done me wonders since I've been here. It has been helping me with my imposter syndrome, like I initially came in with. I feel like I've been able to break that, or at least get to breaking that, because I am confident and I know what I'm talking about. And you'd be surprised how much people will make you feel like you don't know, but you know. And so being confident and just being true to yourself is the biggest thing for me. And then I would say one more thing is that, like Noelle mentioned, like, don't dim your light and don't dim who you are to try to fit in, because even doing that, you're not going to fit in anyway. Like, so just literally be you and do you, and everything is going to work out as it should be. And I believe in God, so I like God put me here for a reason. So that's all. And I appreciate you, Danae and Coco Dias, for like having me here.
Yes, I will say, and I don't want to be too redundant because I think Jasmine really did a great job and hit the nail on the head with a lot of her closing points. In terms of what legacy I would like to leave, I would like to leave the legacy of somebody who was multifaceted and who was passionate about the things that she pursued, and that passion was very evident and almost contagious. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the panel, medicine, while it is a stepping stone for what I would like to do, is not all that I would like to do in terms of just practicing. And so I really think that there's a lot that, as we've discussed in the panel today, really needs adjusting in the system of medicine and healthcare itself. So whether that's through philanthropy, whether that's through mentorship, whatever the case may be, I would like to be somebody that was known to have had some type of role in the improvement of the healthcare system and field for minorities pursuing careers and also minority patients. As for the advice that I would give, I would definitely say that, pursuing a career in STEM can be difficult and it can be challenging. And one thing that I realized coming to medical school that I didn't think about prior was that medical school is not just demanding academically, but it really does force you to really reevaluate a lot about yourself, about habits, about patterns. You really have to cut a lot of the things out of your life that you're not that aren't really serving you, and requires a lot of discipline and growth. And sometimes growth can be uncomfortable. And so amidst of that, I would just tell people to make sure that they have community to talk to, whether that is friends or family or anybody that you trust, because you are likely not the first person that is going through whatever it is that you're experiencing. Mental health is very real. People struggling with test taking anxiety or imposter syndrome, as Jasmine mentioned, or depression, or whatever the case may be, just knowing that they are not alone and isolated in those experiences and in those feelings, but that they can have people support them through their journey in obtaining their degree and reaching their career goals. So I think community has been the most important thing, and I recommend that everybody figures out who that community is for them.
Okay, my legacy, I understand that it may come off a little shallow, But I want to be a role model for little girls. Like you see like scientist Barbie and little girls are like, that's cute, but scientists don't really look like that. I've had a long history of people telling me like, you can't be that smart because you're pretty. And I'm like, what does that mean? And I really want to be that girl. Like I want to be the role model for little girls to be like, I can be smart and pretty, because I'm sure we've all heard that growing up. Like, oh, you're cute, but you're probably dumb. And I just want to be that girl to show people like that's not true. Like I want to be that scientist. Like I honestly didn't meet a Black female scientist until I was a senior in high school. And I was like, oh wow, like we exist. Like I always knew I wanted to do science, but I just thought I was just this one random girl who was doing it. And I want to be that girl to show people like, no, we're out here. Like there are Black women scientists, and I want to be that. Um, and in terms of my advice, this is something that I'm still adjusting to myself and like trying to accept and trying to learn. But a big thing for me coming into school is that I felt like everyone was smarter than me. Like I came fresh from undergrad. Some people had their masters already. And what I had to learn is just because some people have more experience than you does not mean they have more intelligence. And that is a thing I have to remind myself of constantly. You were in the room with these people for a reason. I was in classes with a girl who used to teach with her master's, and I was like, oh my gosh, of course she's smarter than me. That was not true. And I learned that not the hard way. I learned that on my own. But yeah, that's just to say, like, just because people have more experience does not mean they have more intelligence. Like, you're just as capable as these people. That's why you're in the same room. That's why you're both students. That's why you're taking classes together, because you are equally as intelligent, if not more, than those people. And you have a rightful place there, kind of get into that imposter syndrome. But like, you belong here in the space, and that's why you got accepted into it.
Thank you all for that. And thank you all again for agreeing to speak on this panel. I already know it's going to help so many people just navigating their next steps in their careers and trajectories. So thank you guys again for joining. If no one in the audience, the small audience, has any questions, we will go ahead and end the panel. But again, thank you guys for joining. And I hope you guys can work with us in the future soon on other things that we have relating to Black women in STEM. So thank you again.
Absolutely. And thank you for having us today. And thank you to Cocoa Diaries. You all are doing amazing work.
Yeah, thank you guys for having us.
All right, y'all have a good night.
All right.
Great job. Oh, wait, let me pause. Let me stop the recording. Hold on.